Hey guys, welcome back to Chef Rose Cooking Camp. Today we're going to make one of my very favorite things in the whole wide world. We're going to make macaroni and cheese. Okay, so my version of macaroni and cheese has my favorite thing ever, which is bacon. Because bacon makes everything taste better. So first things first, what we have to do is we have to get our pasta cooking. Okay, because it's not just cheese, it's macaroni and cheese. But I don't like the macaroni shape. So I'm going to use a different shape of pasta, and you can use whatever shape of pasta you want. Okay, we just have to start cooking it first. So I brought a pot of water to boil. You can see down here.
Okay, and I'm just going to put a little bit of salt into it so that it gives the pasta some flavor. Okay, now I'm going to take my pasta, and in it goes. You've got to make sure to give it one little stir while it keeps boiling, and we're going to check on that in about 12 minutes or so. That's about how long it usually takes dry pasta to cook. Okay, and you can see I used shells, but like I said, you can use whatever pasta shape you would like. Okay, now over here in this pan I have some bacon, because bacon is my favorite, and I have all this fat that came from cooking the bacon. So what I want to do is I want to take the bacon out, but I want to leave all that fat in there because we need it for the sauce. Okay, because the sauce is the key. So let's see, I'm just going to get all the bacon out. Now, what I need is about 2 or 3 tablespoons of fat, and this looks closer to 4. So I do need to get rid of just a little bit of the fat that's in the pan, because see, this is just too much. And if I left all of that fat in the pan, well, then it would be too greasy. But see, these are called panko breadcrumbs, and this is what we're going to sprinkle across the top, but they won't get brown unless I put a little bit of fat in them. So conveniently, I can take a little bit of that fat that I don't need in my pan, put it into my breadcrumbs, and give those just kind of a stir. And now my breadcrumbs will even taste like bacon too, and that is never a bad thing. Okay, so I've got my bacon, I've got my breadcrumbs. Okay, now one of the major things that in the kitchen you've got to do is you've got to keep very clean, right? And if you see my hands, those are kind of gross. So what we're going to do, we don't just wipe them on ourselves, because who knows what I've got all over my clothes. So we're going to go wash our hands real quick, and then we'll be right back. Okay, I'm giving my pasta just a little bit of a stir, because you do need to stir it every now and then just to make sure it's not all sticking together. Okay, some people put oil in the water for that, but it just sits at the top and doesn't actually keep the pasta from sticking together. So stirring it every now and then is a better way to do it. Okay, I've got my heat back on my bacon fat. Okay, now we're going to make something really fancy called a roux. Okay, all that is fat and flour. Okay, so here in the pot I've got my bacon fat, and I'm going to add my flour. Then I'm just going to whisk. Okay, and it looks nice and brown, right? And we're going to let it bubble just a little bit, because that's going to cook out the starch taste of the flour. Okay, we don't want it to taste chalky. I don't know about you, but I don't like eating chalk. Okay, now see how it's all nice and bubbly around? Now we need to add our milk. But the thing that people do wrong most of the time when they add their milk to the flour is they add too much at once, because watch what happens when I add just a little bit. You ready to see what happens? Look at that! It all seized up, okay? So if you don't add it just a very small amount at a time, you're going to get very, very lumpy gravy. We don't like lumps in our mac and cheese, okay? Lumps are bad. So we're going to just add a little bit at a time, because see, then I can whisk out any lumps that are forming. If you add too much and it gets lumpy, there's not a lot you can do about it except for maybe strain it. Okay? Okay, I'm going to keep adding this just a little bit at a time, and I'll show you when I'm done. Okay, see how thin this has gotten now? And make sure all along, do you see how I'm scraping those sides to make sure that all the flour on the sides gets in there too? Now I'm going to add the rest of the milk. Once it gets that thin, you can add it all at once. Okay, make sure to get all that flour off the sides, or else it won't get the right thickness. Okay. Now we just need to let this come to a boil. Okay, so we're going to let this sit here for a second. I'm going to give my pasta another stir. I'm going to give it a little check. Still looks pretty dry, so it's not quite cooked. So I'm going to give that a stir. I'm going to let this pot over here come to a boil, and then I'll show you what we do next. Okay, this has now come to a boil. Now, if you look at it, you can see that it is still quite thin, okay? But the cheese is going to do the thickening here.
So I'm going to turn it off the heat. Very important that you turn it off the heat, because cheese likes to separate. It has a lot of fat in it, and it likes to separate really quickly. So if it gets too hot, the cheese, the fat is going to come out of it, and you're going to have little weird spots on top, and it's not going to be gooey cheesy. It's going to be kind of weird stringy cheesy. So I'm going to take all my cheeses. Now I'm using like 4 kinds of cheeses, but you can use whatever kind of cheese you want. The key is you just want it to be about 4.5 cups for a full recipe, or this is a half a recipe. So I've got about 2.25 cups. Now me personally, I like brie, and I've got some cheddar and some mozzarella in here, because the mozzarella and the brie are going to make it nice and creamy and melty, and the cheddar, the sharp cheddar, is going to give it a lot of flavor. And then I also have half the Parmesan in here. Okay. The other half is going to go on top with the breadcrumbs. Now I know you're tempted right now to put more cheese in there, because more cheese is more better, right? Well, the problem is if you get your ratio wrong and you have too much cheese, see, that's plenty gooey. If you have too much cheese, then what will happen is it'll just get hard and turn into kind of like bubble gum. And macaroni and cheese flavored bubble gum may be interesting, but it's not what I want to eat for dinner. Okay, so you can see here, nice and gooey. Look at that ooey gooey cheesy. All right. All the cheese is melted, so that's all we have to do there for this second. Now let's check our pasta. Okay. Now get an adult to help you with this if this is really hot for you, okay? So I'm going to let that cool for a second, because the only way to really know that a piece of pasta is done is to take a bite of it, okay? Now I'm going to season with a little bit of salt and some pepper, okay? And then this is the super sneaky ingredient that nobody ever knows about in macaroni and cheese, or what's called bechamel, okay, which is the base of macaroni and cheese, is nutmeg. Okay, now I grate my nutmeg fresh here like this, but you can use the kind that's pre-ground in a jar too. The fresh is always just going to taste a lot better. Now you notice it's not very much. You don't need very much nutmeg at all. Okay, but it smells delicious. Now we're going to take a bite. Pasta is done. You know it's done when it's just still a little bit chewy, okay? Because if it's too soft, by the time you cook it again in the oven, it's going to be overcooked and soggy and gross. Okay, we've already established I don't like gross. Okay, my pasta's ready to drain, but it was too hot, so I had to go get myself something to hold it with. Okay, you may not have one of these nifty little strainers like I do that just takes it straight out. That's okay. We don't actually need to save our pasta water for this for anything. Okay, so we're just going to let this drain for a second. You can just dump it into a colander in the sink too. And if it's too heavy or too much, be sure to have somebody help you with it, because I've burned myself really badly dumping out pasta before, and it wasn't very fun. Okay, now I have this container over here. I'm going to show you in a second that I'm going to dump my pasta into. Now you can also do this in a Dutch oven, and you can just make your sauce straight in that in the stovetop, and then you have fewer dishes because you can put it straight into the oven when you're done. Okay.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my pasta. You can see my beautiful shells here. I'm going to put my bacon right back in, and then I'm going to take my cheese sauce. Okay. pour it over the top, and then we're going to give this a little bit of a stir. Now I did grease my baking pan with a little bit of butter because I don't like doing dishes, and so I try and make it easier wherever I can. Okay, so I greased it because that way it'll come clean easier later. Okay, now can you see this beautiful gooiness? I'm going to bring it here right under the camera so you can see it real quick. Look at this, it's all stirred up. And one more stir. Get all that pasta covered nicely. Okay, here we go, look at that. Okay, beautiful pasta. Now, I like textural difference, so in these breadcrumbs I also had the rest of the Parmesan cheese, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to sprinkle those breadcrumbs over the top.
Now these are a special kind of breadcrumb called a panko breadcrumb, which are a little bit crunchier than the other kind. But if all you have is the regular kind of breadcrumbs, that'll work too. Or some people like to put crushed up potato chips, or some people like to put crushed up Ritz crackers, or anything else that you want on top is fine, okay? Now I'm going to put this into a 350-degree oven and let it bake until the sides are all bubbly and the top is nice and golden brown. Then we get to eat it. So come back here in a little bit. It's probably going to take about 20 minutes and I will show you what it looks like, okay? Okay, mac and cheese is out of the oven now. I want you guys to see how beautiful and brown this looks. See how the breadcrumbs are nice and brown and it's bubbling around the edges a little bit. Now it's ready to eat. The only thing you have to be really careful of is just make sure you don't burn your tongue because it's going to be hot. I hope you enjoyed making mac and cheese with me.